Today, we have 5 true ghost stories that get progressively scarier. Please like and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul. First time I met my great-grandfather, by Reddit user Chubby Mermaid FL. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night to see a man standing in the corner of my bedroom. He was right in front of the closet. I remember running into my parents' bedroom, round to my mother's side of the bed, waking her up and telling her that there was a man in my bedroom. Thinking, of course, that I was dreaming, she checked my bedroom and the exterior doors, and nothing was amiss. So, she walked me to the bathroom to get me a drink of water. He sat on my bed and was sweetly telling me that it was all just a dream. When I said, "Then why can I still see him?" She was shocked, but smart, and she asked if I could still see him at that exact moment, which I could. So she then asked me what he was doing, and I said he was smiling and waving. She then asked me if I could see his feet, and I said no, he was wearing shoes. So she asked me to describe his shoes: black shiny boots with shiny buttons on the side. She asked about his clothing, and what I saw was a dark 3-piece suit and a tie. He also had a pocket watch, which we'll get to later on. I went on to describe his hair and facial features. So my mother said, "Oh, that's my grandfather." For some reason, I was convinced she was wrong, but he just smiled and nodded yes. So I asked her why he was here. She explained that when a family member passes away, from time to time they'll come back and check on their loved ones to make sure they're okay. He said that I had school tomorrow, so he'd probably come to check that I was in bed being a good little girl. At this point, I saw my great-grandfather throw his head back and laugh. He came to visit and look in on me many times as I was growing up. Sometimes he would even bring a friend. But he would always smile and wave at me, and thanks to my mother's comforting words, I was never scared. I would grow up to learn of my great-grandfather's career as a tailor, and I also learned that he owned several clothing stores in the Victorian era. The fob of the pocket watch that he was wearing was a braid of my great-grandmother's auburn hair. I actually own that watch fob. It's tucked away in my home for safekeeping. I keep it safe for future generations of our family to learn about the first person to come from Sweden to America. What is this? By Reddit user TheBearDog340. So, I just moved into some military housing with my husband about a month ago. Nothing was happening that caused any real concern for either of us until this past week. To start with, on Monday, I was hearing what sounded like a tapping noise against the wall and a faint meowing. Logically speaking, I thought that maybe it was just the cold that was causing the tapping sound, and maybe the meowing was coming from the shed outside. That is, until I really thought about it. The meowing actually sounded like it was in our bedroom, in the middle of the night. On Tuesday, I had the most uncomfortable feeling of being watched, even though I'm home alone and my husband is at work. I was overcome with this feeling of being followed up the stairs. That night, I heard what sounded like something hit the trash bag downstairs, and then footsteps, as if somebody was running upstairs. On Wednesday, I was woken up again in the middle of the night by a sound, but I couldn't really work out what it was. It sounded kind of like someone was slamming the edge of a credit card down on the bathroom surface. The bathroom was just outside my door. This continued for like 30 to 40 minutes, and then it just stopped. I was terrified, but after I'd calmed down, I peeked into the hallway just to make sure I wasn't hearing things, and potentially seeing things either. After that, there was the sound of something really heavy falling into the trash can and rummaging around. And today, Thursday, possibly one of the scariest things that's happened, and I know I'm not going crazy. My husband and I were downstairs in the kitchen, and I was telling him about what had happened last night. Mid-conversation, we both froze and fell silent. I looked at him with an expression of absolute fear on my face. I was so terrified, I literally felt like I was about to piss my pants. It was the sound of that credit card tapping again. Only this time, it was coming from the coat closet, not the bathroom, and it felt like it was taunting me. Fast forward a few hours, not long after my husband had left to go to work. I heard the unmistakable sound of somebody slamming my downstairs bathroom door shut. Then came the knocking on the walls. It was around 5 p.m. It wasn't continuous, but it was semi-frequent. I've been suffering terribly with anxiety since all of this started happening. As already stated, this house is military housing, built in the 1950s, around World War II. I've been doing some digging into this online, and have talked to several neighbours about the people who lived here before us. Apparently, they only stayed here for about 3 months. I haven't yet found an explanation for this, so I plan to do some more investigating. My next course of action will be to get the place blessed. Have you ever encountered anything like this? My house is haunted by Reddit user Which and Where. I'd like to make a post about some recent encounters with what can only be described as some sort of paranormal entity. First encounter occurred when I was around 13 years old. We had just moved into my house, and my family decided to go out for something to eat. I didn't really want to, because it was late, and I don't really like eating too late. So this meant it was just me in the house on my own. I was sitting on the sofa with my cat watching a movie, when all of a sudden I heard a man's voice come from behind me, saying, "Here, kitty kitty." My cat didn't seem to acknowledge it, but I heard it clear as day. And when I turned round to see where it was coming from, obviously there was nobody there. A second encounter happened when I was probably around the same age. I had what I now believe to be some sort of mischievous entity around me all the time, constantly. I would trip over seemingly nothing and hear a faint laughter right next to me. I would also place things down in my bedroom. Then when I went back for them later, they'd be gone, nowhere to be found. Obviously, my initial reaction was that my siblings must have taken them, but they denied it and claimed that nobody had been in my bedroom apart from me. Eventually, I would politely ask whoever or whatever it was that had been taking my things to replace them, and before long, whatever it was that had been taken would show up exactly where I left it. The third incident happened probably a year or two later when I was about 14 or 15. One afternoon, I was hiking up in the mountains just behind my house. It was dry season, so all the prickly bushes were all over the hill, making it really difficult to hike, so I decided to turn around and go back home. And then, what sounded like somebody shouting through a megaphone, and it sounded like it was coming from right next to my house. It most definitely would have been heard from inside my house. So, I ran inside and asked my mother what all the noise was about. She responded, "What noise? What are you talking about?" The fourth encounter occurred about 3 months ago. So, I'm 18 now, and my grandfather had recently got sick in another country, and wasn't doing too great. My mother had this horrible feeling that we'd lost him, so we were all incredibly worried. I had gone into the den of our house and started pacing backwards and forwards, because this helped me to deal with my anxiety attacks. As I was pacing, I could see out of the corner of my eye somebody was following me. Just a few feet behind me, a glimpse of a face, but only ever in my peripheral vision, never in full sight. Then, approximately a week ago, my mother, sister and I, who coincidentally are the only people in our house that believe in the supernatural. We're sitting near the fireplace, talking about whether or not my mother was going to purchase my grandfather's ashes from the funeral home. His ashes were currently still in another country. All of a sudden, we heard a very loud bang on the wall, and my mother's mailbox, where she keeps all of her letters and bills, etc., fell to the floor. It was nailed pretty solid to the wall. The only things that fell out were her checkbook, a pen, and a few old credit cards. I guess my grandfather really did want her to pay for his ashes. Our haunted apartment that tore my family apart, by Reddit user Voice City Local. When I was 14, my family of 5 moved into an apartment in a very old town known for its history of witchcraft and murder. I'd like to start by saying that my family were very happy before we moved into this apartment. We were all close, and our lives were great before this. When we first moved, my mum refused to come into the apartment for a few weeks, staying at her in-laws, saying that the place just felt creepy. It started small. My mum and brother were hearing whispering coming from the bathroom. Nobody could look in a mirror in that apartment. Even friends who came to stay over said they couldn't look in the mirrors. My friends often went home mid-sleepover because they just couldn't get to sleep. The bedroom I shared with my sister was situated right next to the bathroom, and all night long you could hear heavy footsteps and the floorboards creaking. My stepdad was very sceptical and totally against the idea of ghosts and anything of a paranormal nature. However, even he commented multiple times that he'd seen an old man walking around in our apartment. On one occasion, my mum was cleaning up whilst listening to Highway to Hell on the stereo. As she turned around, she could see a little girl jumping up and down on her bed. My mum left the apartment in a state of hysteria and refused to ever be alone in that apartment again. My sister convinced my mum to download some fake ghost hunting app on her phone so that they could try to communicate with the spirits. To me, this seemed like a completely ridiculous idea all round. It may be a total coincidence that it was just after this the paranormal activity in our apartment seemed to go rampant and our lives started to fall apart. Everybody started to complain about this feeling of being watched. We didn't feel safe in our home anymore. Over time, my once happy family started to fall into bad habits. Self-harm, alcoholism, drug addiction, abuse became a regular thing. My sister, at 13 years old, started to write the numbers 666 and drawing demonic pentagrams in our wardrobe. I started having nightmares every night about dying, and every night I would swear in my sleep. We're not talking about your everyday profanities. The things that I was saying were brutal and horrific. My sister started having nightmares about me being victim of some kind of demonic possession, and my mum commented on a tall, dark figure that would visit her every night. Chairs would screech across the floor, and things would randomly fall or be thrown in our direction. This would go on all night long, as if this thing was craving our attention. Many times we'd wake up in the morning and go downstairs to find the kitchen cupboards and fridge wide open. My once sceptical stepdad began leaving the apartment for months at a time because he couldn't handle this level of activity. The final straw came for me when I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible feeling like I was being watched by someone. My stepdad had given me a cross and a Bible because I'd fallen into a deep depression with no real reason as to why. I had turned to religion in hope of finding peace. That night, after I woke up, I heard 3 distinct knocks coming from the wardrobe and was overwhelmed by an ominous, oppressive feeling. I ran out of my bedroom and slept in my mum's bed. I had ferrets during this time, and they would stand in the hallway and hiss. or pace back and forth, or whimper as if they were being tormented by something. They refused to go past the doorway of the bathroom and seemed reluctant to even enter some of the other rooms. At 17, I'd had enough and finally decided to leave that creepy apartment. I took one of my ferrets with me to my new apartment, where he seemed perfectly happy. We went in all the rooms, never hissed anymore, and seemed really content. I left my other ferret behind, and he died soon after, and even the vet couldn't give an answer as to how he had died. Whatever it was that resided in that apartment ruined my family. The depression stayed with me, and I dropped out of school. My sister became addicted to certain substances, and my once really happy brother became resentful of everyone around him. Eventually, my stepdad left and didn't come back. My mum claims she talks to spirits, and they're all around her constantly. She's cold, mean, and emotionless. She's nothing like the warm, loving mother that I knew as a child. As for me, I'm no longer in contact with any of my family, and I'm currently under medication for depression. But I don't swear in my sleep anymore, and I'm no longer haunted by those nightmares. Country Club Haunting by Reddit user Drunk and Crunk. When I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, my dad ran a bar in a country club, and from day one, I didn't like being there, especially at night. I would always take my Xbox with me to keep myself occupied. The layout of the building was as follows. You had the main area where the bar was, and through a little hallway were the bathrooms. Then, further down the hallway was another room that my dad had put arcade games in. This room wasn't used very often, but I think that's because not many people knew about it. Through another door was the room where I played my Xbox, and then just behind that room was my dad's office. Outside, where the employees usually parked, was a small loading dock and a gate. This gate led to a bunch of old swimming pools that had been shut down a long time ago. One day, as I was wandering through the old pool area, I saw what I initially thought was a person. It appeared to be wearing a black gown with a hood, and moved very quickly away from me inside the derelict pool area. But what really caught my attention, as I focused on this person, was that they didn't appear to have any legs. From the waist down, this person just kind of seemed to be a blur floating along. Before I could apprehend what I was seeing, they'd disappeared around the corner. So, being the curious kid that I was, I went looking around to see if I could see who or what this thing was. But I couldn't find it, and never saw it again. Another time, I was feeling pretty bored, so I was just wandering around playing games. I could hear the piano playing in the ballroom that was just outside the bar and the pro shop. I went to see who was playing, but there was nobody there. There was, however, imprints in the leather stool, as if somebody had recently been sitting there. I've replayed this moment in my dreams, time and time again over the years. Being in that ballroom, while the piano is playing, but nobody's there. On one occasion, in my dream, I was an adult, and again, I could hear the piano playing in the ballroom. This time, however, I could see a small child standing with his back to me. He was facing the stage. Just as he turned to face me, everything went black. I've also had numerous experiences in the back rooms where I'd hear disembodied voices and footsteps and doors slamming, but again, there'd be nobody there. There were a couple of rooms that were located just a short distance from the kitchen. I'd only been in this area once. The power was shut off in those rooms, because they weren't really used. They were like locker rooms for the pools. I walked in one night because I thought I heard somebody in there. I got maybe 3 steps inside when I heard a really loud crash. It sounded like somebody had thrown a chair in my direction, but I couldn't see anything. It was as if something had been alerted to my presence and wanted me out of there. I duly obliged. I turned around and ran the other way as quickly as I could. The last experience I'll tell you about was one night as my dad was closing up. I was sitting in the lobby just off the ballroom when I could see somebody pacing around just outside the door. This time though, it looked like a full person. Legs, arms, eyes, mouth. I could even see the expression on his face. So, presuming it was a patron of the bar, I brushed it off and turned away. When I looked back up, the guy, quite literally, disappeared in front of my eyes. I saw his upper half just fading away. I was absolutely terrified. I ran to my dad crying, and for the life of me, I couldn't get the words out to tell him what was wrong. I was just completely inconsolable. That place never sat right with me. I learned later on that one of my friends had stuck in there one of the nights while it was closed, a few years later. She described the exact same apparition that I had encountered the first time with the hooded robe. She also heard the piano playing in the ballroom, and heard the disembodied footsteps in those rooms just by the kitchen. There are rumours of a few deaths that occurred in that place over the years, including a murder and a suicide. I don't know how valid these claims are, but something definitely isn't right about that old country club. That wraps things up for today. If you enjoyed these stories, please like and subscribe for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul.